So this screencast will introduce the while loop, and I'll do that by solving the problem which you see written out in the file here now. So the problem is this one. What is the largest integer number n such that the sum of 1 through n, and so this is the colon notation from an earlier video, so that the sum of 1 through n is less than 2000. So what I encourage you to do is to pause this screencast and just have a think to yourself about how you would code up this thing as a computer program. So what sort of steps would you use if you were trying to program this up? And so then after you've had a think about it, then come back and watch me work through the solution. So the first thing that I'm going to do is basically design the steps for this in pseudocode. And so my design will work a bit like this. So I'll have a candidate value n, and I'll start with, let's say, n equals 1. So assign some candidate value n equals 1. And then what I will do is I will calculate the sum of 1 through n, calculate that sum, and then I'm going to basically I'm going to step through values of n. So I want to be repeating this structure. So I will say that while the sum is less than 2000, then inside of this structure, so this is a new construct here, but I'll just introduce it in pseudocode and then show you in MATLAB. So while the sum continues to be less than 2000, then I'm going to increment n by 1, and then calculate the sum of 1 through n, and then that will be the end of my loop. And so I'll talk about what this while structure here actually means. So what it means is that it will test this condition, and if the condition is true, then it will run the code inside the block, and then it will go back and it will test the condition again, and if it is still true, then it will run the code again, and it will continue doing that until such time as this condition eventually returns false. And once it returns false, then it will continue from the next line below here. Now, there's a tricky little edge case here in the sense that once we end our while loop, we end the while loop because this condition was false. And so if this condition is false, then it means that the sum is greater than or equal to 2000. And so that means that we've actually overstepped the mark by 1. We've actually gone 1 larger than the number that we seek. And so then, the final point, the answer will be n minus 1, because we have to go back to the largest one such that our condition sum less than 2000 was actually true. So that's the design for our algorithm, and I encourage you to do steps like this to actually write out the pseudocode as comments in your MATLAB file, and then fill them in later with the actual MATLAB code. So let's do that. So the first one here, to assign this value n equals 1, well, that's easy. We would just do that. Now, to calculate the sum, now there is actually a sum function which will do this for us, but for the purposes of the educational benefit, I'll show you how you could implement that yourself. So let's say for some reason you could not use the sum function and you needed to make your own, then how would you do it? Well, this is a fairly common pattern where you want to reduce an array, and so the array in this case is 1 through 7, into a single number. And so it's useful to become familiar with these kind of patterns. The pattern is this, that we start with an accumulator value, which in this case will be 0. So we start with 0, and then we have a for loop. And our for loop will step through each item in the array, and then it will add it to the accumulator. So what will happen here is that we start with 0, and then that should not be a 1, that should be I, be careful there. So we start with 0, and then we add to it the first item in this array, and then the second item, and then the third, and we keep looping until we've added them all in. And so by the time we get past our for loop here, then this variable sum will contain the sum of 1 through n. So now how do we do our while loop? Well, I'll show you. Syntax is this. And then inside that loop, these are the things that we need to do. So I'll just press tab there to indent that. So what we want to do is increment n by 1. So that's n is equal to n plus 1. And we want to calculate the sum of 1 through n. Well, we just did that up here. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it in. And notice here that the indenting is not correct for these other elements. So what we can do is we can select that and I press Control I on the keyboard. Control I will indent, and one of these buttons up here, there it is, apply smart indenting to selected text. We'll do the same thing, so just indents the code for you. So then we calculate that sum, and that was all that we had inside our while loop, so I type in end, and that completes that. So then the final thing that we need to do is the answer is n take 1. And so we'll just print that to the screen with our disp function, like so. So I'll save that, and I will, just for purposes of completeness or for clarity, I'll put CLC and clear at the top of the script here, just to get rid of anything that may already be in the workspace and to clear off the command window. So now I will run that. Look over here and you see that the answer is 62. So that was the result from our program. What was the largest integer n such that the sum of 1 through n is less than 2000? So that's how we would use the while loop.